There's a couple
the whole
more.
room, actually.
Yeah, okay, perfect. There's a couple more who are coming that obviously we want to be here for the presentation, but out of respect for your promptness and I know a desire to get out on this lovely Friday afternoon, why don't we start? I'm Danielle, I'm with Sussex Strategies Group. We're partnering and supporting Mike and team with communications on this project moving forward. So I just am here to make sure that we get your feedback, that we have a great conversation, and we get your input specifically about how you would like to hear updates and receive information moving forward. Because this is not months, this is going to be years that we sort of are embarking on a journey here together. And so we want to start out at as optimal a spot as we can. So what we can do is do a round of introductions. Also, so all of you hopefully will introduce yourselves and then everybody knows who's in the room. Mike has a very comprehensive presentation, really focused on what have we been looking at so far, but also where are we today and what are the next sort of horizons of activity to give you that fulsome view. We're happy. Ideally, we had said take questions at the end, but I think if you have a question that will help you understand what's on the slide, it's a small group, so let's take them as we go, just because that will allow you to clarify something as we go. There are about 30 slides, but we want to make this as useful for you as possible. So with that, why don't I pass to my colleague to introduce herself?
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Raman. I work at Sussex Strategy Group as a senior associate in communications, but today I will be taking more of a secretarial role. So if you see me typing away furiously, I'm just writing down what you said so that we make sure that we capture everything. But nice to meet you. And
Are you going to record?
it's up to you. Do you want to record this
sure.
one? Okay, so we're just going to
Yeah.
record Mike's presentation. So we want a nice version of it to put online, but we won't be recording the question period. Just so you know.
Just so that you don't feel like have to think about what you're saying, but it's really just for transparency. We'll post minutes from this meeting and the earlier meeting, again, just so that everybody knows the questions that were asked as we move forward. Mike, let me pass to you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm Mike Jacobs. I'll do it when I'm there, but Mike Jacobs, I'm the CEO of KBM Indigenous Professional Services, hired by Georgina Island to sort of manage the project from almost a staffing point of view, right? The island's resources are pretty tight, so what happens is they need to bring in some experts, and I'll lay out some of that. Calling myself an expert just made myself laugh. So, so I'm here. I'm the face. I can speak, and people can chat at me and ask me where to go find information. I think is the best avenue rather than expert.
Why don't I pass to you, just because you guys work together as well?
Sure. Hi everyone, Corey Kinsella, part of the SIPS project team, looking after, I guess, the coordinating of the environmental assessments, both the Western and the traditional TEK side of things. So happy to be with you today.
Thank you. My name is Farzin. I'm Director of Project Management Office at WSP, the consulting engineering firm that Mike's group and the First Nation has retained us to provide the technical services for this project.
Hello everyone, Magid Ibrahim. I'm a senior project manager Bridges. So all my experience actually are in bridges, tunnels, retaining walls, highways, those type of structures that we are working on. And it's a pleasure to us that we be with you on that project, to work with you for the success of the project.
How about I pass to you?
Hi, I'm Ashley Brown with Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. I'm Director of Development Services.
And how about yourself next?
I'm Dorothy McEwen from Nature Berry, and also from sort of like a North Simcoe Indigenous Relations team. I'm co-chair of that.
And how about yourself, Anne?
I'm Anne Trurians, and I'm on the board of directors of Aware Simcoe.
Oh, perfect.
Hi everyone, Vinny Boyer from the town of Georgina. I'm the Director of Development Services.
Good afternoon. My name is Tanya Thompson, and I manage the communications division for the town.
Hello, Sean Dasky, the town of Georgina. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives.
Hello everybody, my name is Tony Muscat, I'm the Chairman of the Barrie Métis Council, and I'm representing the Métis Nation of Ontario.
Perfect. So what we'll do is I'll pass to Mike. He can go through the slides. If you have a clarifying question, we can, you know, we can take it as we go, and then at the end, I'll just sort of come back and we can make sure that any other question arising from the presentation is captured, and then we can have a little bit of a focused conversation about what would you like this information flow to look like, and then if there's anything outstanding, we can capture that as well. So with that, over to you.
Excellent, thank you very much. And like I said, I'll introduce myself a bit more formally. My name is Mike Jacobs. I'm a member of the Prairie Lake First Nation, which is a Williams Treaty First Nation member. My family has worked at Georgina Island for probably, I've done 20 years. My dad's probably worked with them for as many more. And then my brother also works at, runs Island View Business Center sort of spaces there. So our family has served Georgina Island for a long time. So I can't tell you that I have the lived experience of a Georgina Island member. That's not why we were hired. We're hired because we're a trusted voice to actually push on the voice of the Georgina Island First Nation Chief and Council. And at this point in time, I'm a Bachelor of Commerce degree. I'm not a scientist, right? So I have all of these, I've been moving all the parts and all the chess pieces to start to get to the people that we have. So we've got WSP here, we've got Sussex on communications, as the project starts to take off. And I'm calling this the Fixed Link Project Introduction. Some of you have been introduced to this project prior to the initial project description, right? Some of you have been introduced to the project, and we said we're gonna do all these great things. Well, guess what? We put in the IPD, and everyone asked us all these questions. We went, I don't know. I don't know exactly what it is. Like, we don't know as ourselves what it is we're going to do, so let's go investigate. Let's go and really start to understand what it is we're doing and what this is going to entail, and then try and answer some of the questions to a satisfactory spot. And I'm gonna go through where we are in the IAC process. I'm gonna go through those elements, but I just wanted to give you that background of where we're at. Now, for those of you that were in previous presentations, we do have time for you guys to speak after, okay? But please, like I said, ask questions. So what happened with the community membership is, the community of Georgina Island, they gave a directive to Chief and Council. It's a little bit different, where it wasn't the planning department, it wasn't someone that said, oh, this is what we should do, right? It was the membership saying to Georgina Island Chief and Council, it's time. Our ferry boat is becoming aged, and it's time to do something different with transportation. And while the opportunity is here, let's investigate a fixed link. And some of the reasonings behind this, right? The current transportation system is aging and requires replacing. We want a safe, reliable, all-season system. We're witnessing the lake changing, and that safe, reliable passage year over year is not reliable, unpredictable, and becoming less and less safe. We're feeling the socioeconomic and health impacts of the current imposed transportation system has on our community members, both on and off territory. We understand that our current system impacts the lake and the environment now. We understand that this project will impact Lake Simcoe through all phases of assessment, design, construction, and use. We must work with Mother Earth traditional knowledge and Western science to ensure that we understand the impacts, we investigate those impacts, and we ensure comprehensive mitigation measures are used when required. The First Nation does not have the human resources or the fulsome skills in the community to fully comprehend the impacts, right? The First Nation doesn't have that space, that sort of wavelength, that sort of reach. So that may result from this project, and they're looking to others to support us. So whether it's your organizations, whether it's WSP, whether it's ourselves, we want to have some questions asked of us. We want to have that, and when it came to the IPD station, or IPD, we wanted to have that happen, right? We wanted to have those questions, and when they came, we realized that we didn't have those fulsome answers going forward. But what happens is we get the community members going, and then what's the process within the First Nation? February 17th, 2021, the council said, we've looked at it enough, we've done this sort of preliminary investigation, is this something we want to do? And the Chief and Council, through way of, it's called a Band Council resolution, notified sort of the federal government as well as their members, as well as future Chief and Councils, that the council reaffirmed that the ancestors used a natural land link. There was a natural land link between Georgina Island and the mainland. Reaffirmed the loss of that land link during the Trent Severn construction. Confirmation that there is not a single safe, secure, and reliable all-weather transportation method currently. Confirmation that the community feels unsafe crossing the lake. Confirming that community members have lost their life attempting to cross the lake. Affirming that climate change is affecting the lake and making crossing unpredictable. Affirming that a safe, secure, and reliable all-weather transportation method is of paramount importance. Affirming that research has indicated that a fixed link comprised of a causeway and bridge will offer safe passage. And we want to affirm that the members, through consultation engagement, have directed the council to proceed. What was resolved was that the First Nation intend to build a fixed link that will connect Georgina to mainland, and they desire to have the impact assessment done by December 31st, 2024, and operational by December 31st, 2026. For those of you that might work in a political organization, you set these dates to propel a project to make sure there's momentum. You know, we're probably a little bit behind that as of today, right? But one of the impetuses for this is that the ferry system is becoming to the end of its useful life. There has to be a transportation resolution in Georgian Island within the next 3 years for the useful life, 5 years if it's extended, you know, if pay for the repairs, pay for all those sort of things. So that's what the council has dictated in February 17th, 2021, that this is what they want to do and this is what they want to queue up to the feds and their community, right? It's sort of an affirmation. We've heard you, we are doing this, these are the reasons why, and here we go. So the timeline pre-resolution to present, right? We had, prior to 2008, there was a study called the Negan-Burnside study. And that study, I think it put the cost of the bridge at $3 million. Right, or $8 million or something like that. Like that's how long ago the study was, and it talked about where the bridge should be. It started to engage community members on what a bridge or what a project might look like, and that never really went anywhere in terms of operations, except it was always in the back of the community's mind of, is this something we want to pursue? Is it like we've done this initial look, and what we wanted to do was update some of that information. Community did that, and what happened in 2018 is a technical team was hired to explore sort of the information was outdated, right? We needed to really go back and take a big long look at that. The technical team at WSP was brought on board. We were brought on board at, oh, sorry. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Great, have a seat. The technical team was hired. Ourselves are hired as what's called the secretariat. Like we said, we're the labor that moves all the parts. And then 2021, we get the council resolution. After that, we start doing engagements with the First Nation and First Nation youth. We start meeting with Indigenous groups. We did meet with Métis Nation of Ontario, as well as Huron-Wendat. Come on and have a seat. As well as Huron-Wendat, we met with Georgina and York regions. We met with what we call lake stakeholders. I'm going to have to change that from what I told in the previous meeting, that it's not the lake stakeholders, it's the organizations that protect Lake Simcoe, such as NatureBerry, right? As organizations such as that, such as Aware Simcoe, those are what I refer to as the lake stakeholders, as opposed to the individual landowners. The people that are looking after the lake, generally in partnership, by the way, in a lot of instances with the First Nation. So then we get to this sort of stage, we do the IAC summary, we do the initial project description, we get the summary of issues, and we pause the clock. We say, okay, hang on a sec, right? We're supposed to respond in 45 days, you know, to the summary of issues. We said, hang on, we can't do that because we don't know, and that didn't sit well with the island, right? Obviously it didn't sit well with anyone who had issues either, but it didn't sit well with the island. And with that came a pause to the clock. So right now we're on a pause between the IPD and the DPD while we sort of gathered some information and got what I would consider our ducks in a row a little bit more effectively, a bit more efficiently. We started May 22 going out into the field, starting to look and investigate some of the issues. We generally did not put a shovel to the ground. I can't say that exactly. We did when we were looking for turtles or snakes or something along those lines, but we didn't drill boreholes in the bottom of the lake. We didn't do any major sort of assessments or investigations, but I will detail what investigations have been done to date for you. So we've got the field work going, and then in June 2023, we start to get some of these results, right? We start to hear a little bit, and we're starting to get some of the results of some of this work, and now it's time to share and engage with the public and sort of to sort of put ourselves out there. What do you know? What is this going to look like? And this morning we had a presentation with the local community, and of course the local community on there was a key focus in sort of where this bridge is going to connect, and that engagement happened this morning, and it was as expected. Is that the best way to put it? It was as expected, meaning that absolutely, right? You're going to get a fixed link in your backyard. You want to know about it. You might be a little bit upset about it. That was the sort of framework of the meeting today. But happy to share any of that, any of those results, and the results will be shared on the website as well of that meeting. So what we're looking at is probably in October 2023 DPD submission. Okay, so detailed project submission going around October 2023. Why are we waiting? One, we're going to open up this engagement sort of window here to talk things out, to really listen to the issues before we get to the DPD. But also we have to wait for the full season of ecology to be completed and for those existing condition reports to be finalized, which will probably happen around September. Okay. So we've got all of this activity going on. This is where the background comes from. Everyone familiar with the IAC process in the room, or should I do a little bit? Do a little bit?
Sure.
Okay, sure. So what happens is that you can see the websites up there, and by all means you'll get a copy of the presentation. It's all public in here. The Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, it leads the federal impact assessments. So what are the impacts of your project, right? What are the impacts all the way across, not just to not to Mother Earth, not to the land, but across socioeconomic impacts, financial impacts, impacts to people's homes that we just had a meeting with today. What are all of the impacts? And they look at all those things with the lens of, we need to protect the environment. We want to make sure the project contributes to social and economic well-being of the people of Canada and preserve the health of people of Canada for present and future generations, right? That's their mandate. So we get these parties in there. So we have the proponent, which is Georgina Island First Nation in their language. You've got the reviewers, which includes the experts, the scientists from other government organizations. I think like Simcoe would be a reviewer in that, in a lot of instances through the IAC process. You've got Indigenous groups, so First Nation, Métis, and Inuit, that we have the responsibility to communicate with. And then we have what's called members of the general public. Today we're here talking about members of the general public, and we wanted to give you the same presentation to make sure that you're aware of what was being said to the general public and where the project is. So that's about where we are in the IAC process of who we're talking to. So there are reviewers here as well, but mainly to the general public is where this was intended. So when you look at the impact assessment, process, right? We submitted the initial project description to IAC. We received the summary of issues from IAC, and then what we're setting up next is the detailed project description. And one of the things we want to note here is, or one of the questions that we get asked, in particular by the members, is why did GIFN select this process instead of the existing First Nations Land Management Act code, right? They're First Nations Land Management Act signatories, so they actually have some rights that they can do things that they want on their own lands that are sort of governed by environmental principles, but at the end of the day, have the rights to do those things. And it was they wanted to hear the extra voices. They wanted to hear the people of Lake Simcoe to protect Lake Simcoe. They wanted to hear from other groups to make sure that what we're doing is not going to affect the lake. We heard it today that Georgina Island sort of praises itself on being lake protectors. How can we do that if we're not partaking in that process? So we want to make sure that we're heard, and then we want to ensure alternative avenues for comment are available. Some people may not feel that their voice is heard if they're writing to the First Nation. They're going to say, well, the First Nation is just going to go ahead and do it anyway. So what we did is we established a nation-to-nation relationship with IAC so that people can respond through federal channels to the government of Georgina Island, so that you've got a nation-to-nation relationship, so that your nation will hear your voice and propel that voice going forward if your nation believes in that voice and if that voice is strong enough, right? So that's the way it's going to come. And the IAC process seemed an avenue for that to happen, instead of everyone just phoning and saying, by the way, I hate this, or I hate that, or I can't do this, or I can't do that, right? You know, what we want to make sure is that people's voices are heard, so the IAC process was used. Where are we right now? So it's another sort of graphic of where it is. We're here between the preparation of summary of issues and the detailed project description. We're responsible for the purple, right? So that's our group. So we've got the detailed project description responses to summary of issues. We'll be doing that. And then there'll be a decision between an IA or an impact assessment being required or not required. And then we would proceed with regulatory comments. It was pointed out earlier today that I just want to say the option for us is to not proceed with a full IA, that we want to provide all that information up front and have a really good feeling ourselves and have all that information already gathered before we go. And I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. When the summary of issues came in, I don't want to sort of gloss over that they were all rosy, that everyone was like, yes, go Georgina, let's do that. As with any infrastructure project, that's not the case. So we had 72 comments received, and you can see the website up above, where you can look at all the comments and read them as they were typed in by the respondents. But many of the comments were opposition, which is normal and expected. Obviously they hurt our feelings, but WSP said, no, that's normal. IAC said, no, that's normal. Everyone sort of said that if people are opposed to a project, this is where they say it, and you're going to hear about it. One of the cool things that we had was that IAC had to have an internal meeting on how to handle many positive comments. Right? They generally don't get positive comments within the IAC process. It's generally just people that do not want it or don't agree or want something different. And there were a number of positive comments pertaining to the safety, health, and well-being of the First Nation members. So we've got that sort of happening. And then, there are some general themes that I'll go through. But we've learned some lessons from those comments. We need to educate people how the First Nation and the transportation system work, meaning that not many people really understand the island, its function, and how it goes, how the money, you know, is spent, who provides money, where all that sort of happens. We need to provide some education there. And then they also raised some valid points that we should understand better. So we want to go look at them and investigate them a bit further. Some of the points here, some of them were procedural, meaning that they were government department responses. If you do this, you're going to need this permit through the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. If you do this, make sure you do that. So there were procedural comments made. There were a number of concern, negative, worry to address. And some of those were environmental concerns. A majority of them were, of course. You're going to build something in Lake Simcoe, the beloved Lake Simcoe. Make sure you're doing it in a good way. There are better alternatives. So some people said, and I had someone today send me a text about, you know, a battery-powered ice-breaking ferry system that might be an alternative solution. So there were all better alternatives that were presented. And then the other one was who is going to pay. It's a bad choice of taxpayers' dollars, right? That this is, you know, like, how is this going to be paid for? So people are saying it's not a good sort of element. So there were elements of support for the project. There was health and safety and community benefit, reconciliation were sort of those that supported. And the Williams Treaties First Nations all provided a letter of support. So the First Nation communities all support this project and where it's going, and that Georgina Island will care for the land the way that they want to. So for those of you that have tried to go through a duty to consult process and the Indigenous communities are sort of opposed, it can be a very big hurdle. That hurdle for us has been sort of subsided, although we still have the duty to consult and accommodate, even as a First Nations proponent. We still have to do that, but the Williams Treaties First Nations chiefs have all provided letters of support that were in the initial project description. We did reach out with the Huron-Wendat and the Métis Nation of Ontario. They support the project, but obviously they have key concerns when it comes to archaeology, economic inclusion in the project, and how are they going to be consulted with as the project went forward. So we did have that part of it. The Canada Infrastructure Bank has provided what's called an accelerator fund, which is an advance of loan money to allow us to pay for some of these studies and do some of this work. So we have the support of the Canada Infrastructure Bank, which is in Infrastructure Canada. We did reach out to local and regional politicians. I think they would, the tie to support here probably doesn't mean they support the project, right? They support Georgina Island and want to be part of this process going forward. So please don't think that they're like, yes, go for it, GI, we're all on board. That's not the case at all, okay? The case was, keep us informed, let us know, and where we go. So please, yeah, I saw that this earlier, and I'm like, they don't support that. They might get questioned on that. Sorry. Support the island, understand the need for the project, but haven't sort of given a stamp of support, okay? And then the general population, there were people just out of the blue saying, I can't imagine being an island member trying to drive across that ice road. I can't imagine this, what you're going through. I can't imagine that life that you're living, and there were comments like that as well. So when we get all these comments, we start to go, okay, well, let's start to address some of these environmental concerns for sure, because we heard them from our own community. You know, are there better alternatives? We investigated them slightly, but we haven't done a financial dive into how much a new ferry or a different ferry would cost. We haven't done those dives at all. And then the taxpayers' dollars, bad choice. You know, that's a choice of opinion, but the reality is we're going to have to do some financial assessment as well to that end, right? To prove that it is a big choice. So from that information, the impact assessment summary of issues, what we did as the First Nation, committed to learning more, right? Made a significant financial investment into learning, committed to sharing what was being learned by initiating this engagement process from what we've learned, which is different from our initial presentation. And we paused the clock on the DPD submission while we informed ourselves to be better proponents, right? We wanted to inform ourselves to make sure we were good proponents and that we were being treated the way we wanted to, that we treated others the way we wanted to be treated in these processes. What that means is we're going to have to educate about Georgina Island First Nation. We need to contextualize that need for a better transportation system. We need to open the lines of communication to share why the fixed link makes sense, what we know, and what are we learning or need to learn. And then the other side of it was this general project understanding, right? We had to figure out what it was. We paused the IAC process, and there's been independent research completed in 15 disciplines, several investigations into the impact, right? Talking about impact and addressing some of those. For those of you that might have seen an initial presentation, this is what the assumptions were based on what we asked the community. Okay, not necessarily what is the best thing, what is the best space, where is it, but when we talked to the community and they gave us what they think or where they think this would go or how it would look, and a little bit of investigation by WSP, right? The project came here. So when you look here, unfortunately my other slide that has the sort of selected route, or the preferred route, I guess shouldn't be a selected route. The preferred route is different, phrased a little different. Here's the ferry boat system here now. And with the LiDAR presentation, you can actually see where the ferry disrupts the bottom, right? You can actually see it from LiDAR of how that goes. That was taken the first 3 months of COVID, right? So that's when the LiDAR pictures were taken. Georgina Island owns the two properties, the one in purple and one black. We call this one the Bay Vista property. We call this the West property, just for context. And what happened was we looked at these projects. It was going to be about 1 kilometer of roadway, 2.3 kilometers of fixed link, causeway, bridge, causeway type approach. And these were assumptions. And before we invested a lot of money, we wanted to sort of know some basics using those assumptions. What we've done in the last little bit is trying to firm up some of those firm up those assumptions so we'd be better informed. So what we have, and I will bring it to you later, but what ended up happening through some of the reports, and I think I confused people in the previous sort of slide, is what we're talking about is this is the route, the light blue, but it's actually going to push to the east a little bit, and it's going to come in where the ferry lands up top. So they've sort of moved the line. So when you see the line, that's what we're talking about in this space, and then the red area is what we call the study area. Okay, the red frame is the study area. So those were the assumptions that we went forward with. Those were the assumptions that we had. And what the community said is, okay, let's firm up some of these assumptions. Who are we going to bring in? We've got Intrinsic, who does the health impact assessment on the transportation system on the First Nation members. We've got Silvicon that does a little bit of forestry work. We've got WSP that does a ton of work in construction, in probably all the disciplines WSP was involved with. But we get Cambium Consulting and Engineering as the primary ecology team that is under the eyes and the watch and the careful watch of WSP. So we actually have a double system of ecology, sort of, if Cambium missed something, we should have another ecologist there saying you missed that, right? The community really wants to know that element. So we've got this team of what's going on. And I said 15 disciplines because I did add the Intrinsic, 17 with about 36 multiple deliverables. And it began in Q1 of 2022, and it will continue on and through till the end of the summer in 2023. Invested about $1.6 million to date, and that's increasing. Just kidding. It's going up because we're planning stuff out. What are some of those disciplines? I don't want to go through them all, right, of where we are, and I am going to talk about some of them in a bit more detail or a bit more volume. But we've got archaeology. We wanted to say what the air quality limits would be. We wanted to look at some bridge engineering. You can't give a scope of cost if you don't at least think about the bridge design. We have not engaged any bridge design, right? The bridge design is all sort of tentative, but we have not started that design process. We may need to because of timing of the project, but we haven't started that full design process yet. But we have looked at some of the engineering part of it, some of the civil engineering as well, ideas around environmental site assessments and contamination. Ecology, you can see the number of things there. I'll go into a bit more detail there. The geophysical has taken place, some geophysical. Geotechnical, where it says water boreholes, like I said, we didn't do that. We sort of worked with WSP, and a decision not to be invasive was the decision that was taken. So we used a non-invasive process for that for now. Heritage, I'll speak to that a little bit. The health impact assessment by Intrinsic is there. We talked about noise, security, spills, stormwater management, and then there's some traffic transportation. When you talk about some of the people that were in planning, right, strategic planning and those types of things, traffic will be impacted, but I'll sort of speak to that as well. Sorry, I will speak to that. I've got to start. I was told today I have to stop tempering my words with sort of or might or could. Gotta be more assertive. So archaeology, we assume there's going to be a high probability of finding archaeological sites as communicated by WSP. Long history of Anishinaabe being there, stopovers, campsites, portages, etc. In the near term, there's a potential increase for archaeological phases, which means more expense. In the longer term, there's potential for setbacks, avoidances. So like I said, we haven't made decisions yet. We haven't done the investigation. We haven't done a phase 2 to say, oh, by the way, we should get right around that, right? We should avoid that space. We haven't done that depth of work, but what we're going to do is continue assessments going forward and share findings according to the Williams Street East First Nations protocols. Okay, and those protocols involve, you know, a lot of preservation, a lot of action items. For those of you that have found anything, the Williams Street First Nation has a lot of archaeological monitors. Traffic, we talked about that. For those of you that don't know, we've got traffic meter counts and automatic traffic recorders. So we've got ATRs, or we had ATRs and TMCs all around. We did them on both sides. And what we found out is that, you know, we did projections, we did all these type of things, is that we're going to have to work with the region planning for a solution that may require lights at Park River, or Park Road and Black River and Haddon. And we understand that it's probably likely that there would be lights here at some point anyway, so you know we might have to do that, but just working with the planning department. We want to note that the number of island users, there's not a lot more space for more cars, right? The number of actual individuals driving is not expected to go up, right? There's not going to be, oh, we get a bridge now, we're going to have 500 more cars on the island. That's not the idea, but there will be many more trips, right? The ferry is a bottleneck, and there will be more trips where people say, let's just go and grab some dinner tonight. Let's go to the baseball game instead of not because the ferry's down. Let's, you know, so all of these things that sort of impact the community's ability to participate, you know, that's going to go up. So we understand that the number of trips will grow. Number of trips are going to grow, but really the volume of cars and that, it's in the projections, but it's just something we wanted to know. That we understand that, we get that. Coastal engineering, so there was an acoustic Doppler current profiler, deployment and sediment sampling, very fancy words. Very expensive words, I found out. Yeah. Very expensive words that are there. But they were placed around. So what this has done is this is going to grab some of the baseline the baseline numbers so that the modeling can be completed, right? So that the wave and the sediment modeling can all be designed within the computer systems and put into place, so that we'll have a fulsome look at what might happen or what could be the impacts from a fixed link, especially a causeway in certain spaces, and a bridge and piers and those types of things, what they might do to this space. And that's the modeling that's in process now, and we're expecting that in the near future, I should say. I won't put a date to it, but it's coming. So it's ongoing, and the release, you know, will be ready for the DPD, but of course it has to be. But you can see how there's been a lot of work done there. And you might have seen some of these in the water, and that was us. Okay? Someone might have said, there's a yellow thing in the water, what the heck is that? It was us. Okay? Where did that come from? Are they building the bridge already? We've heard that as well. Source water protection, or source water hydrogeological studies. We've done some well surveying on the island itself because they knew about the project. We didn't do well surveying here at this point in time. We didn't want to go and say, by the way, we haven't told you anything about the project. Can we look at your well because the bridge is coming, right? We weren't at that stage yet. We are now, where we're probably going to want to do some water investigation here, and the WSP team is chomping at the bit to go do that. So with this meeting, we'll be able to start that process. And then, so the well water survey hasn't happened. Source water, there's been 3 identified, and then there was another one identified on Duclos as well. That someone had said their source water comes in over there, and that it's filled with lake water right now. So that's one of the things we learned today that we're going to take back and have a quick look at, and make sure that this is accurate, because when you talk to the islanders, right, this is our source water, right? This is key to who we are as people. These are important sort of slides and information that have to be there, because if you're impacting source water, you're impacting life in general as part of a strategy. I talked about non-invasive geotechnical work. So we've got the multi-channel analysis of surface waves, right, which is non-intrusive geophysical analysis versus borehole drilling. What you come out with is, what does the ground look like? What we want to know is it going to be cost prohibitive to dig here, right? Is it going to be super impactful? Do we have to do a different style of digging? Do we have to do something unique, right, in that space? And what we found out is probably not. Okay, from that simple investigation was that, you know, it's organic clay, silt till, a little bit of weathered limestone, but these are all sort of normal technologies that would be able to build a bridge within these spaces. Okay. Someone also asked the depth of the water. If that's we're talking between 1.5 meters and probably 3 meters at the max. Right. This is not a navigable channel that we're talking about with anything larger than a boat of someone who knows how to drive through. Right. It's we talked Still, Georgina was at the first meeting and they sort of confirmed that no one goes through there, right? So as far as it being a navigable channel, it isn't really, it's pretty shallow in there. What were some of the other disciplines we used? We had the civil engineering, which is bridge constructs being designed to provide parameters for the other disciplines. So, you know, yes, we had a civil engineering and bridge sort of design elements, and we asked for a picture even at the First Nation level. What to, you know, I can't do without a picture. What is this picture? And WSP said, well, we'll give you one, but don't hold us to it because everything's going to change, right? You don't know what it's going to look like. But what we started to look at, well, what were the foundations? What were the sort of the elements that are going to be a part of that project in the civil part? And we will have a bit, Megan is here as well to talk about sort of the structure itself as it looks now, based on all this information. Air and noise, so we did baseline air and noise data, you know, to see what level of noise are currently happening, so we could assess what the impacts would be, right? If we don't have the baseline data, and we're gonna have what you would call a, you know, and you're gonna have large pile drivers, right, making big bangs of noise, we can't do that during certain birding seasons, right? You're gonna impact the ecology of the area because the noise will harm that species. So we wanna make sure that we have those elements part of it. The heritage, there was a desktop review highlighting the cultural heritage or lack thereof. I'd like to note here that the First Nation members have way more impactful standards on heritage. Heritage, you know, mainly looks at the appearance of the space, where there's more of a heart and soul and feel to the heritage investigations at the First Nation level. So when we saw the heritage report, we're like, okay, but it's way more important than that. It's way more than that, right? Like, so when we saw that element, you know, the heritage, we're quite confident we'll do well there. And then there was some environmental assessment, right? It's going to be assembled for the detailed project description. Now that we have information coming in, this engagement is where we're going to start to get the information out. How do we do that, right? That's what we want to talk to you about, is how do we get that to you. A lot of you will be concerned about the ecology. Obviously, the First Nation, it was first and foremost in everything the community said, so like the First Nation said. Just like if you've seen a development project go off the First Nation, it generally goes right to ecology. How is the natural world going to be affected? So we've done a lot of work in that area, and you can see there's stuff there, right? Lake Simcoe, right? There's a bit of stuff there, right? You know, this is a very highly active space within the ecology space. But what I'll take you now is to the mainland. So there's two properties. I talk about the Bay Vista property and the West property. On those investigations, especially on the Bay Vista property, what you had was a, sorry, I'm slowing down a bit. Water.
Provincially significant.
Thank you. A wetland. Thank you. A water thingy, right? I know it's called a wetland. Trust me. But yeah. So there was a wetland here that sort of had a lot going on with it. So if you're going to choose between the two properties that the First Nation owns, you end up going towards the West property that has a lot more development on it and a lot more sort of activity on it historically. But when you see them, what you've got is you've got large minnow populations in the spring, you've got multiple adult breeding snapping turtles, chorus frogs, waterfowl nesting areas, 3 stick nests, which mean raptors or hawks. They're species at-risk birds, meaning the whippoorwill, meadowlark, and wood pewee. And then the mainland West property, you can see that there's a little bit less. It was sort of a no-brainer between the two, ecologically speaking, and the First Nations mind generally goes there. There were other positive elements towards the landing of the water on the West property as well that contributed to that, to contribute to a choice of that side. But it wasn't made lightly, but it was sort of determined that the site will probably go to the West property, barring other investigations. And then we get to the on the island. So we talk about one of the primary sort of spaces here. This is the ferry boat here. There's a really significant wetland here, and you get breeding snapping turtles, painting turtles in the wetland, 7 species of frogs, confirmed nesting of least bitterns in the marsh, species at-risk birds like the whippoorwill, wood pewee, barn and bank swallows, black tern, great egrets, and swans were also present in the marsh area. So that's the marsh area itself. The Sand Islands have gone through another investigation. That's in the second phase of the work. So they went through a spring birding. So the Sand Islands are also being looked at. Although they were documented, it wasn't during peak times. Corey, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Corey was on site a lot of times, and he was looking at some of the ecological. So this work has been done, and there's a lot of species there, and that's one of the things that the assumption that moved the assumption. The other thing that we did that usually goes a bit more above and beyond that other communities that other development projects do, is the island wanted to know if there were any species of concern. Meaning we have traditional species that are very important to us. Are there any identified in these spaces? And that's what Corey went and did. So yes, there were large strands of fiddleheads present on the mainland properties. There were turtles present in Bay Vista property and the study area. The marsh home was many species, the swans, the egrets, the blue herons, the bitterns. So not only the ones that are species at risk, right? There were more species that the community holds dear and near to their hearts that will be impacted by this as well. There was noticeable deer sign on both West and Bay Vista properties. It's a wintering yard, it's a known wintering yard. There were eagles observed flying over the study area multiple times. There were large older birch bark trees present on both the West and Bays. There were cedars present on West and Bay Vista, right? These are important species to us that everyone say just cut them, right? Trent University got in a lot of trouble from cutting down a bunch of cedar trees, right, without talking to their Indigenous Students Association, right? It's the same. We've got a large section of cedars. We want to make sure we have that. Things that the community really likes are morels, puffballs, leeks, chicken of the woods, but that wasn't found, but habitat does exist for those. Okay, so they weren't found, but they're important to us. And just a note, a little funny note to let bit of brevity, there were brewing hops on the west property, so. So just some pictures here, and you talk about we talk about the intersection of traditional ecological knowledge and the ecology program that was going on. So we start to see some of these species, we document them. We've got the least better nest with eggs, which we've told is a very rare, important sort of species that we want to look at. And one of the reasons why the buffer was moved from going right over, by the way, for some reason the initial thought was to go right over that marsh, and now it's moved over and sort of pushed and goes around the marsh to make sure that we don't affect certain animals and certain species, the marsh in particular. I shouldn't say it's particularly for these, but very right, mating pair of turtles there. We've got lots of different nests and then some basking spaces. We've got the what's Wallen?
Eggs.
Just eggs.
Those are Canada geese eggs.
Canada geese eggs. Okay, thank you. And you can see the minnows. You know, it's not one or two. We didn't just see some minnows, right? There's minnows there on the Bay Vista watercourse, and then there's the trees there that we're talking about. So after all that's said and done, and I'll take you back to that other slide, but what happened was we had option 1 and option 2 in our first assumptions, and what comes out is to stay away from this space here, right? Everything that we've got is we want to stay away. So we end up pushing the path to the west. Okay, so we're going to push that over to the west, and we're going to bring it into where the ferry lands instead, right? That's an area that's already been disturbed, you know, significantly, continually for a number of years. So let's bring it over, bring it away from the sand islands. And you say, why didn't you do that first? It's about depth, right? You know, we're doing a development project. There's going to be costs associated. The deeper you are, the more expensive. So we knew that the depths were there in our initial investigations. But as you move it out, it's going to be a bit deeper, but it's better, right? It's better for the world. So, so we wanted to have that there. So, Megan, I'm going to give you a little bit of time to talk about the sort of the bridge structure itself, to give you an idea of where the engineering team are thinking. But I want to let you know that, again, no design has happened. This is just the investigations that the bridge design team's done. Thanks, Megan.
So basically, actually, we were thinking about option 1 that actually goes around the islands here, the little islands in the water, and we found that this area is not recommended because of the islands over there that is being owned by some people. So we actually try to get away from these islands here, and we go for the green line, which is option 2. We found that option 2 is a bit shorter as well, so it works much better. Option 3, as you can see here, that goes to the other property, which has a lot of species at risk. So we actually prefer to go for the west land, as Mike mentioned. We thought about, since here there are some islands, then this area is a shallow area, so we can actually go with a causeway in this area, as the water actually is not running very well in this area. So this is actually can be utilized and save some money for the link. And then we can start from here all the way close to the land by a bridge of about 1.2 kilometers. and then after that we go back to a short segment of causeway that actually ramps down to the ground for the land. The causeway actually is going to be about sheet piles filled with granular. That's one option that actually would reduce the footprint in the water. Excuse me. The bridge actually is planned to be long spans, so that would have much less piers and the foundation in the water. That's about 120 to 150 meter spans. The depth of the structure would be about 7 meters at the pier, 3.5 meters in the middle of the span. That would be about 10 meters high from the water, so that allow for navigation without much interruption as well for the speed and the running of the water. We looked at the sedimentation and as well the erosion around the piers, as well the ice breakers in front of the piers, so that actually would not accumulate ice and it doesn't hit the piers. The bridge is going to be of the shape of curved arched from the bottom, and segmental bridge, usually it's 4 meter segments, 4 to 5 meter segments that they actually start from the pier and construct one segment from each side, so it looks like double cantilever until the closure from the other side of the pier as well, and they close it off, so that actually makes the pier, the bridge continuous, so nothing actually will be supported on the water. So basically they will transport all the material by the barrages, they use that by the cranes and they get it up, and everything will be from top, so nothing would be at the bottom except when we are constructing the foundation.
Yeah, distances, can you remember the causeway, bridge causeway?
Yeah. So basically the total length is approximately 2.4 kilometer, as Mike mentioned earlier. So half of it would be causeway and half would be approximately the bridges, so that would save a bit significant cost as well. For the causeway as well, we may actually provide some vents opening in the water, so that we allow the water to move on, so this area would not be a dead water at this location. That's the main thing.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Rough order of magnitude, obviously the design has been this, the design for our assumptions, right? The design that WSP provided is this. The design for our assumptions is that those are the things that are going to happen. We haven't done an investigation into those areas, but based on the cost and where we think we can position this project at about $300-400 million, that's where this bridge is. That's what the cost is sort of estimated for that work. Excuse me, I'm almost down to my last hour here. My last slide, I think, a couple more. So what we want to ask is, how do you want to be engaged? And this was the question we posed to the community members this morning about how, right? What do you want us to do? Where do you want us to go? And what we want to do is, especially with your organizations, is we want to engage with them. So there's a number of them, right? There's a number of engagements. We would like to group presentations if we can. We can do those types of things. But in what areas and what spaces do you want to play? I don't mean to say like, oh, I want to learn about it all. Of course you do. We want to keep that element. But if there's core elements that you want presentations on, like today someone asked about land tenure on the First Nation, right? That's not something that everyone here is going to care about in their project, but it's something that we're going to present and will be on the website. But do you want to be engaged directly yourselves in that space, right? So those are the kind of questions and some of the things that you want to do. So there's IAC information, which is sort of the core minimal amount of information to get through the IA process or to go through there. And I shouldn't say minimal. It's the information that's needed specific for the IAC process. And then there's project information, like who are the members of Georgina Island? What is the population? What's life like, right? I specifically talk about, in the next slide, that I don't put a lot about why in this deck, right? There's a number of reasons why that makes sense. What I want to hear is all of the problems with the technical, because the why has to overwhelmingly support that technical, right? That why has to do that. So keep us informed. The First Nation community members are engaged in a process with themselves, and we're looking forward to your input, responses to the IAC process, because that's the space, right? If we're building a nation-to-nation relationship between Georgina Island and the federal government of Canada, the space is through the IAC comment process. So we expect a lot. We would like that, but at your tables that are protecting Lake Simcoe, you have a special voice, right? You know, not that the individuals aren't. It's this special technical voice of understanding the lake. We want to hear. We want to hear if our process was wrong. We want to hear if the timing was wrong. We want to hear if any of that information was wrong, because someone pointed out earlier, what if you're wrong, right? An individual citizen. What if you're wrong? And you're like, right. So how do we do that? We eliminate risk as much as we can, which Farzine has told me that I have to do, is keep eliminating risk. And by doing that is with information. So the more we can get from you and the more we can share. So I talked about lesson 2 that we learned, but lesson 1 as well. We've invested time and money to understand our project and the impacts, right? The IAC process was selected by Georgina Island, and to ensure that your community voice was heard. This presentation is intentionally laid on the reasons why the fixed link is the best option for the community. There are sections dedicated to the reasons in the DPD, but there'll be a number of education pieces that are going to come out resulting from this, right? We want to talk about who we are, why we need this, what is going on, and Sussex is here to help us do that, to help us compile that message. They're meeting with council. Like I say, when was that done? It's happening July 5th, I believe, is a meeting, right? So these are things that are happening that still are going to impact this project. It hasn't been designed, it hasn't been built, it isn't for a specific purpose except the health and safety of the community, beyond what the general population believes. But we're gonna have op-eds, we're gonna have those types of things. But you know, I've already been requested, can you come and give your presentation again to the town, right? Can you come and give this presentation again? What we want to do is start scheduling those, and where do you want that focus to be, right? Because if Lake Simcoe says, well, how did you study the least barrier, right? I know they did it, and I know they had all the scientific nomenclatures and all, you know, all those things that I sort of glossed over in my reading. I said, what does this mean? You have least bitters, you need to move a little bit, right? You need to make sure that you're protecting stuff like that, right? So that's how I heard it, but ecologist to ecologist, we want to have those discussions, but we need to get time for Cambium to come or WSP Heather to come and sort of say, here's the process we used. Is it a trusted process? Did you missed this report? Well, damn, give us that report. Like, let's get it in there. Those are the types of things we want to do, right? The Métis Nation, where do you want to play in your duty to consult in the accommodate process, right? We understand that process better than probably most of your proponents. What is that process that you would like us to follow to make sure that you're engaged, included, and consulted with? So that's what we're here to ask. I'd like to have an open conversation. Please ask us any questions that you might have here about the project itself, and then, you know, open the line of communications, whether it's here today or, Mike, we want to do this after, right? Like, we're here to talk about it as well. So that's my presentation for today. I really, really want to appreciate you coming. It's Friday afternoon. You know, I get it. It's hot in here. I get that part too. I'm sweating pretty bad under this coat. I think nerves might have a bit to do with it as well. There's lots of eyes here for it, facing me. But at the same time, happy to answer any questions. We have the technical team here to help support that. And Sussex is going to lead that because they're obviously, as part of the IAC process, we're documenting engagements. This is one of those documented engagements. Please don't think that it isn't, right? I want to be upfront with that. Sometimes in our First Nations and Indigenous stuff, it wasn't sort of pointed out that this is an engagement. So, thank you for that, and I think, go ahead. Thanks. Applause. That's awesome.
Sorry, I think
it could not be my.
Yeah, I'm stopped.
Okay, I think I stood in the